Trojan fans at USC are sure glad Matt Fink stayed on campus. Backup quarterback led his team to win over 10th-ranked Utah at the Coliseum Friday night. The victory got USC back into the top 25, puts them atop the Pac-12 South standings at 2-0. And it's been a quarterback carousel out in the land of Troy. JT Daniels out for the season with a torn ACL. Then Keaton Slovis suffered that concussion against Utah. And now Matt Fink coming in relief, getting it done, at least for one weekend and the foreseeable future. And with that, what's good, streaming people? Welcome to CBS Sports HQ. I am your host, Tommy Tran. Alongside with me, as always, is Brady Quinn. We also got Chip Patterson joining us as well, Cover 3 pod host. And usually I like to have our guests go first, but Brady actually got to talk to Matt Fink on set after the game at the Coliseum. What did we learn about Matt Fink there last weekend there, Brady?
Well, to some degree, he's kind of unflappable, but at the same time, I think he was in shock based on how that game worked out and the fact that he got thrusted in there and the way he played. But, bottom line is, this young man has built up a lot of equity with his teammates. They're the reason why he decided not to transfer and stay at USC. And so they were excited for him. They know what he brings to the table. He's the best athlete they have at quarterback. So now if you're looking at Graham Harrell, I know he's an air raid, offensive play caller, but he may want to incorporate some quarterback run for Matt Fink because he's got the ability to do so. I think that would be something that would help them as they have to go up against a very tough and stingy Washington defense this week. And I am assuming he will get the start. I don't necessarily know that Keaton Slovis will be able to pass the concussion protocol in time. If Slovis does, though, it becomes a bigger question because last time we saw him on the road, given the fact he's a true freshman, he struggled. 3 interceptions versus BYU. If you look at the construct of the Washington defense, they also are a team that likes to only rush 3 and drop 8 into coverage at times. And if that's the case, it could be problematic for the true freshman. So maybe they go out the hot of hand. Maybe they stay with Fink. It's early in the week, still too tough to tell.
Yeah, it's a top 25 matchup. They both share a common opponent in BYU. Chip, what do you think about this matchup? We talked about it, potentially having Fink now go on the road at UW in a game there in Pacific Northwest.
Right, I'm looking there at the Washington defense, not only going up against presenting a great challenge for Matt Fink or Keaton Slovis, but Brady mentioned the way that Washington likes to attack. And not only will they just rush 3, Washington has difference makers at the defensive line that can get to the quarterback even when they're only rushing 3. So the combination of that and the elite players that they have on the back end of that defense, just one of the best pass defenses in the entire Pac-12. Even a great group of wide receivers like what USC has, I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be, some hero ball catches by Michael Pittman on 3rd down. It's going to be very push and pull for USC to find some offensive rhythm. And when you're going at tempo, when you're going no huddle, when you're trying to, open things up and move fast, those kind of drives that might turn into 3 and outs can just be game breakers. And that's why, it's going to be very impressive if USC's offense can find any kind of consistency in this game, because I think they're going to be going up against a stiff challenge of Washington's defense. And Washington's defense is just going to be looking to get them off the field, give Jacob Eason the ball as many times as possible. He looked great against BYU. Unsure of what I'm going to expect from him specifically against USC. I think Washington's defense makes this game real easy for Jacob Eason and the Huskies to go and just cruise to a win.
Well, one thing that's going to take some pressure off of Jacob Eason's shoulders is if they can get that running game going. That's something that Chris Peterson always wants to have, a very balanced attack. So I do suspect they'll try to run the football early and often. That has been one of the weaknesses for the USC defense, is being able to stop the run. So keep an eye on that moving forward. But just to touch on one more thing in regards to the Washington defense, this is the number 2 pass defense in the Pac-12. And so it's a very favorable matchup for them to go up against, even though it's a talented group for USC. But they've been this way for quite some time. You heard Chip Patterson talk about some of those rushers up front. Keep an eye on this, though. Joe Tryon, one of their better defensive linemen, he'll be out for the first half of this game because of a targeting penalty. Something to kind of watch and see whether or not it hurts the pass rush of the Huskies. He won't be able to play until the second half of this game.
All right, and this is one of 2 top 25 matchups this weekend. We will get to Virginia and Notre Dame in just a little bit. But, guys, now we transition to number 5 Ohio State at Nebraska. And it wasn't looking good for Ohio State, 5-0 early, and then they reeled off 76 straight points after being down to Miami of Ohio. Chip, I'll start with you first. What are some of the things you'll be looking out for in this one?
I think Nebraska's defense is in trouble. Because while there are aspects of Nebraska's team, starting with Adrian Martinez and that offense, that are impressive, I mean, they were in a fight with Illinois. Illinois kind of had that game in control for the first 2.5 quarters. And I think this is a huge mismatch because I've been very, very impressed with Justin Fields. I mean, it's great that he has J.K. Dobbins, one of the top running backs in the Big Ten, right there in the backfield with him, so that even when they got off to a slow start against Miami of Ohio, it's like Ohio State fans can just count on Dobbins as just the ultimate relax factor. Like, relax because if we continue to run the ball, we're going to be able to open things up. We're going to make the play action that much easier on Justin Fields. And then we saw it with 6 touchdowns in the second quarter alone. This offense is full go right now. And I think that Ohio State's offense, full go, is just so much stronger than anything that Adrian Martinez and Nebraska can keep up with. Ohio State is happy to be able to just turn this thing into a shootout because they know that its defense is going to be able to probably have an advantage against Nebraska's offense. Nebraska can't keep up. Ohio State lights the scoreboard up. I'm sure the environment is going to play a factor, but even with that taking into consideration, I just still see the Buckeyes just being able to overwhelm Nebraska in this huge spot for the Big Ten.
Look, this game a year ago was actually somewhat close heading into the fourth quarter. Nebraska was able to hang tough. Adrian Martinez had a pretty solid day, but part of the reason for that was they were able to run the football effectively. That's been one of the biggest changes that I've seen from the Ohio State defense this year. Bringing defensive coordinator Greg Mattison, Jeff Hathley, they really have taken to this group and got them to be one of the tougher, stoutest defenses in all of college football, and it helps when you've got a difference maker in a defensive end like Chase Young, who's tied for the lead in sacks in the country right now. So this Ohio State defense, to me, is what's going to be the difference maker, stopping the rushing attack of Nebraska. And then we don't even know if they're going to have one of their star players in running back Maurice Washington. He left last game with an undisclosed injury at this point in time. We don't know what to expect. If they don't have his explosiveness out on the perimeter, it could be a long day. But I suspect this defensive front for Ohio State will be getting after Adrian Martinez throughout the course of the game, making it incredibly difficult for him to be able to get passes off. And on the flip side, you talk about this Ohio State offense with the way Justin Fields operated within it. I mean, so far, they can basically do what they want, and in part, again, because of a much improved offensive line. You look how much more aggressive these guys are. You heard Chip talk about the rushing attack with J.K. Dobbins. Well, it wasn't there as much last year, at least not consistently, because this offensive line wasn't as physical. You're seeing an entirely different element from this offense for that reason this year. So I think it all starts up in the trenches. I think that's where Ohio State has the decisive advantage, and that's where they really blow the doors off in this matchup.
Let me follow up real quickly on Adrian Martinez because he had 327 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 118 on the ground. I'm sure he'd like that again against Ohio State. But Chip has mentioned the defense being exposed. You and I have talked about Nebraska when they lost to Colorado. They have struggled on defense. Yep. Now when you know you have to put up a lot of big numbers, how do you go into that mindset as a quarterback?
Well, as a quarterback, knowing that you're going to have to put up numbers, you got to take some chances. And you're going to have to try to do some things early on in this football game to ride on that momentum of playing at home. But obviously you can't do too much where you're turning over the football. So, ball possession is going to be huge for Adrian Martinez, and in particular how he takes care of the football on third down. Because in a lot of those passing situations, that's when Ohio State really feeds off of opponents, putting them in third and long and then taking advantage of negative plays and turnovers. So Adrian Martinez has to be good in particular on third down. And look, when you move the football, and if you can't get in the red zone, you got to figure out a way of using those legs to get in the end zone if he has to. Anything but field goals, because, again, you're not going to be able to keep up with this high-scoring Ohio State offense.
A lot of pressure on Adrian Martinez. Nebraska outscored Illinois 15-3 in the fourth quarter to get that road win, but it's not going to be that easy going against Ohio State. All right, let's get to that other top 25 matchup, UVA at Notre Dame. It's that top 25 matchup where we had Notre Dame play close over there between the hedges over at Athens. Brady, you were the only one I know that said they would keep it in the number. They're Fighting Irish. When you look at this game, what stands out to you here?
Well, the biggest question I have right now for Notre Dame is how do they bounce back? I mean, this is a tough physical matchup on the road, and it's tough to then get yourself back up for another top 25 matchup against a team that can run the football effectively, and it's different than what Georgia presented. I didn't think Notre Dame would have an issue with the rushing attack for Georgia, in particular because Jake Fromm's not a part of that. When you look at their team so far this year, they've struggled with teams that can run the football and can do so at the quarterback position. That's what UVA brings to the table right now with Bryce Perkins, who's a very good athlete. So it's going to be a difficult challenge and task for their defense. And then on the flip side, this UVA UVA team leads the country right now in sacks. Ian Book's going to have to take care of the football. And one bad habit he's gotten into right now, and you saw it if you watched the end of the Georgia game, is when he looks to scramble out of the back of the pocket. And if you all of a sudden run to the right or left of the back of the pocket, you're cutting the field in half, and you're making a much more difficult throw for yourself, given that you're retreating and giving ground. He's got to trust this offensive line. He's got to step up into the pocket, or he's got to get the ball out of his hand quick when Bronco Mendenhall in this defense for UVA does decide to bring pressure. So all in all, a lot of this still falls on Ian Book and how he leads this team and how he performs out of the gate, and whether or not UVA looks to try to jump on Notre Dame in this spot.
Yeah, this is a gut check game because you come out of just an incredibly physical challenge that I think Notre Dame answered the call for. They raised their level of play. They said, you want to play in this kind of bang it in the trenches game? Well, guess what? We are ready. We are ready to throw bodies at the ball to slow down the Georgia rushing attack. And now they're going to be asked to go up against a team that, led by Bronco Mendenhall, has an incredibly physical edge. UVA wants to get you down into a street fight. They want to turn this game into something that it's going to be the fourth quarter. It's going to be a one-score game, and they can give the ball to their best playmaker, Bryce Perkins, and say, hey, go make a play. This is incredibly important. If Notre Dame wants to avoid potentially finding itself in a spot where they might get got with a letdown loss, show up and impose your will early, because Notre Dame is the better team. Notre Dame should win this game by 2 touchdowns if this was being played on a neutral field in a vacuum. But it's not. This is college football, and the body blow theory is exactly what I'm looking at. And that would be a great thing for Brian Kelly and this Notre Dame program, which has made changes to address strength and conditioning within the program over the last several years. If Notre Dame answers the call, if Notre Dame gets right back up off the mat and imposes its will, imposes some physicality, start running the ball on UVA. Don't put Ian Book in a 3rd and long scenario. That would go a long way in terms of what we think about the Irish moving forward the rest of the season.
Well, remember, Bronco Mendenhall, now the head coach of UVA, used to be at BYU. He's very familiar with Notre Dame, had a number of matchups throughout the year versus the Fighting Irish. So he's very familiar with the confines there in South Bend. He's very familiar with, what this team brings to the table. So keep an eye on that. And then the last thing is this running back position for Notre Dame is banged up. Chip just talked about the running attack, and that's going to be key in this matchup. But, will they be able to fill in that void, or are we going to see more jet sweeps like we saw at the beginning of the Georgia game with Lawrence Keys and some other creative ways of getting some rushes to the outside because they are limited at the running back position?
All right, so it'll be a quarterback battle. Of course, Ian Book, and we know Bryce Perkins leads the team in passing and rushing so far this season. All right, guys, my favorite time to go line dancing, and we start with Texas Tech, number 6, Oklahoma. Oklahoma had a week off. They're a little bit idle, and yet no, the line has moved in favor of OU from 24 to 27. Chip, what do we make of this line movement here?
Well, this isn't recent in terms of this week, but Texas Tech did lose Alan Bowman to an injury, and so we've got a little bit of change over there for the Red Raiders. And I think that also people are going to be just jumping on top of Oklahoma, trying to think that they can get ahead of the market. It is very possible that as Oklahoma enters Big 12 play, they will not only be winning these games, but they will be covering these huge spreads, because I believe that they really are on a tier, potentially by themselves. We'll see, but potentially by themselves, they're at the top of the Big 12. So, you might be actually getting good value to try and get this under 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I actually love Oklahoma in this spot for this reason. You heard Chip talk about the quarterback decision. Look, it's either going to be Jet Duffy, who hasn't started a game since last season, or Jackson Tyner, who hasn't started since he was back playing quarterback at Rice a couple of years ago. So either one doesn't have a ton of experience, at least this season, with the new offense, new coaching staff. That's obviously worrisome. And the other thing is, this is going to be a track meet. This is going to be all about if Texas Tech's offense can keep up with Oklahoma's explosive attack. The Texas Tech defense is improved. They are more aggressive under Matt Wells, their head coach, blitzing more, doing some different things that we didn't necessarily see them do as much in the past. So it's something to keep an eye on. But still, again, Oklahoma's coming off a bye, too. They're going to be just as prepared for this one as Texas Tech is. So this one has all the makings of a shootout to me, and I think Oklahoma should be able to cover that spread easily.
All right, both of our guys talking about laying it with Oklahoma, getting that number before it gets to 28 and you continue to grow. We anticipate up until this weekend. Moving on to the next game, number 1 Clemson at North Carolina opened up at 24.5. Now at 27. Chip, you're going to be at this game. Your first thoughts here on the line movement in this one?
Well, North Carolina confirmed that starting left tackle Charlie Heck, really one of the only veterans on that offensive line, is not going to be able to be cleared for the game. He's been working to get back from injury. They also lost their veteran center 2 games ago, I believe in the Wake Forest game. And so what we're looking at for North Carolina offensively, Sam Howell has been great as a freshman quarterback so far, and they've been okay running the ball, but going up against the Clemson defense of pretty much all underclassmen starting on the offensive line, I think the line movement is really a reaction, or at least a realization from the betting public to the fact that, Clemson doesn't have those, a Dexter Lawrence, a Cleveland Ferrell, a Christian Wilkins, those names that you already know. Well, Xavier Thomas, you better know that name. You better start to tune in to the new crop of Clemson defensive linemen, because I think they do have a big advantage against North Carolina's offensive line, and that's why we've seen the line move in the Tigers' favor.
Well, that and the fact we just saw North Carolina lose to Appalachian State last week. I mean, look, this is a bad spot for North Carolina. Disappointing loss. They could have been a 3-1 team coming in with a little bit more buzz for this matchup. That's not going to be the case, though. And this Clemson team, I think, has yet to really showcase a complete game from both sides of the ball, in particular from their quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. This is where I feel like he has that moment. I know it's on the road there in Chapel Hill, not necessarily the toughest environment to go in there and get a win. So this is a good spot for Clemson. Again, another big spread, but I think it's one that Clemson will cover. And again, put up a bunch of points in this one. I'm not necessarily sure how much Sam Howell and that North Carolina attack will be able to put up.
A little bit of shine coming off of North Carolina. Started the season 2-0, now 2-2. So, again, coming off that App State loss was really bad there for the Tar Heels. All right, so, look, we had country line dancing, big lines. Sometimes we got salsa or tango, big lines. This one's half a point, but it's important, right? You got number 12 Penn State at Maryland. It's kind of like slow dancing. There's not a lot of separation, yet it's still important. We talked about Penn State opening about a touchdown down to 6.5. That would suggest there is some money, or at least the perception, going Maryland's way. Brady, I'll start with you.
Yeah, look, this is a big game for Maryland, particularly because Penn State and Maryland, they obviously compete with each other on the field and off the field in recruiting. So Mike Loxley understands how important this is to put a feather in his cap once the offseason comes around. They are recruiting. But bottom line is both these teams came off disappointing games last time we saw them. We were surprised and shocked to see Temple be able to stymie this Maryland attack based on how their offense looked. Josh Jackson was pressured. He was inaccurate. And I think that's what you're going to see from this matchup. I like the favorite in this case. I like Penn State. Tough physical game versus Pitt most recently. But when you look at this makeup of this team, they can run the football well. KJ Hamler, that speed, and the rest of the receivers on the outside. And I do think Sean Clifford is capable of operating the system, not to the likes of Trace McSorley, but close to it. So I think it's a good spot for Penn State. They bounce back here, get a solid win versus Maryland.
I think the movement's probably just distrust for Penn State. I think that Penn State still needs to prove that it's definitely the 12th best team in the country. And we've seen Maryland play above its head in, the turtle shell, as Mike Loxley likes to call it. He's trying to make it a difference maker. He's trying to create some home field, bring some buzz back to College Park. I think Maryland might play over its head again. I understand why people are trying to jump on the underdog at home.
All right, and we saw Penn State, by the way, didn't cover against Pitt, but we saw what Pitt did to UCF. So we're talking about how tough it was for them to cover that 17-point spread. Again, you guys both like Penn State. You might be able to get them, although Chip's saying maybe the dog there having a shot. Again, that line right around a touchdown. Thanks to Chip Patterson for joining us. Cover 3 pod host Chip. Great stuff as always. Appreciate it, my man. And when we come back here on CBS Sports HQ, time for Brady to share with you players you should know. Anthony Gordon's on that list. Who else? Find out.